What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of All Bass Creations, effects, tutorials, demos, and review. Hold on, let me get this volume up a little bit here. All right, so today we're going to be building bass synth sounds from scratch, right? So we're going to do this on several different devices. We're going to do this on the Enzo X. I have one over here on the pedalboard as well as one on the desk. I'll be doing the editing on the desk for that. And we'll be doing a bass synth on the Chimera. We might even sneak one in on the Future Impact. And we also have up Roland's Zenology GX app, which is gonna, has a very powerful synth engine to be an app, to be honest with you. Let's see how we get this popping. Make sure we up and running clean here. Make sure I hit that like button as y'all coming on in. Definitely appreciate it. See, yep, okay, good. We up and rerunning. See, I ain't even see all these come. What's going on, folks? Appreciate y'all chiming in. Audio's good? All right, cool. Oh, no problem. Thank you for chiming in, and thank you for that comment as well. Hope you're having a great day. So, let's start with the Chimera. We're just going to build a couple of them based off of a saw wave and typically a square wave. But what we're going to do, one thing I want you to get used to is not necessarily a formula. Let me change this just a little bit. Not necessarily a formula, but, get used to how these oscillators sound. Right? Let me move this over. Don't want those touching. Right? So that's a sawtooth wave. Let's come over here. To the Chimera. And one of the biggest things you'll notice is all of the oscillators sound slightly different. Like none of them sound the exact same, even though this is a sawtooth and here's a sawtooth on the Enzo X. As well as here's one on the Roland GX app. Oh, that ain't it. I forgot I initialized that patch. So we'll go over the VA on here and get a nice saw wave there. So that's the Roland Zenology GX app. And we'll also do one on a free app on the iPad, which is the Pure Synth Platinum 2 app. It's actually free. You can just download it. Actually, the Roland Zenology GX app is also free for the next year. So if you got an iPad, it won't hurt to just go ahead and, download it for free. And for the next year, and I find I'm probably going to get the paid version, also have the paid version on my laptop as well. So very good app. But the Pure Synth Platinum 2 app is free and it's completely unlocked. Let's pick a wave here. Let's say saw wave. So as you can hear, all of these sound slightly different. That's the Pure Soul saw wave versus the Roland Zenology GX, which is the same engine as the Phantom and all of those. All right, so it's just slight differences, but when you start running these through filters and other things, it becomes even more important. You know, the sound, the actual sound of each oscillator. That's why even if you built the same bass synth on all of these things, it would be completely different. Now, let me see what I got queued up here real quick. Matter of fact, let me turn on, let me do everything I'm supposed to do here real quick. Hit that like button for me if you haven't already. I greatly appreciate that. Let me see, bring this volume down. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't as well. All right, let's get this popping. All right, so we got the future impact initialized here as well. Let's bring that volume up. Future impact got a real fat sound to it. That's the Roland GX app. And again, Pure Soul. Doesn't sound bad for a free app. Q-Mirror. And Enzo X. So as you can see, you start with a nice fat sound in general, you know, you'd be looking for with the various units. So let's start again with the Q-Mirror, like I said. Now, the thing about the Q-Mirror is it's always polyphonic. So it's never actually, you know, you have to kind of fake you have to do more articulation than you would, or a different type of articulation than you would with the monophonic synths. So let's take that. Which is that? Let's take this Q-Mirror. And we'll add to that. We can just add another saw wave, right? And we can also, we got the ability to slightly change the texture of that saw wave as well in different synths. So it's not just the saw wave as you hear it, right? When it first comes up. So you can use that hard sync on there to kind of change the saw waveform. I like to keep it hard sync completely off for this. Then we can come to the second oscillator. You get two oscillators in here, right? That's most bass synths can be built with two oscillators. So, you know, a saw, you can pick a saw and a saw, or you can, you know, mix and match them. But typically you're looking at square waves, triangle waves, saw waves, and sine waves. Those are the ones you'd be looking at in various configurations. All right. So now that we got that. Matter of fact, before that, let's turn this oscillator off so we can just hear what we're going to do with the second oscillator. So, second oscillator. We're going to find something with some nice bass to it. Right, that's a triangle, square. you know, typically on something like a Moog style synth bass, is typically like a saw and a square wave. So let's check that out, and we'll typically drop this down an octave as well. Bringing in the first oscillator. And if you want a little bit of chorusing, you can choose the detune, one of the oscillators. If you don't want so much chorusing, just don't detune it as much. No detune. You're already getting some nice bass synth. Have a good one. Appreciate you stopping by. Right, or you can choose to make this a triangle wave on the bottom. Right, and I typically on the Chimera, I typically keep that lower octave one up a little bit more than the rest, you know. Definitely helps out. And you can throw a sine wave on the bottom as well. Right, so we can take that, those two oscillators, and we can run those through filters. On the Chimera, they have quite a bit of them, but we'll stick with the Moog style filters for now. So we'll go with a Moog style low pass negative 24 dB ladder filter situation. So bring that, roll off some of that top end on that cutoff. Right, so you already got a decent bass sound there, even without including the ADSR for the Chimera. You already got a nice heavy bass sound. Right, now we can add some resonance to that, not too much. Start adding some of that ADSR in there. See how far we want it to open. Okay, so now we got like the filter cutoff set. We can always go back and tweak these things. We got how much the actual ADSR will be interacting with the filter set and the resonance. We hop over to the ADSR section, and we can do things like have that filter slowly come in, right, with the attack time. Move this right here. Or we can have the filter open immediately and have a longer decay time. Or Now, typically when I'm doing bass synth setups, I like to keep it around the amp ADSR. I'm typically it's just all sustain, you know. But you can play around with that if you wanted to fade in the sound. Oh, sorry, wrong ADSR. Fade in that sound. Or you can make it short and plucky. In this case, just some decay. Or if you wanted more of a sound that has sustain to it, but has like more of a natural decay, you can use no sustain, no attack, no release. And if we turn that sustain all the way off, the sound will completely decay out. So even right there, you got something going, but all we need is some good sustain in there, and you're pretty good to go. Now, if you want a sound that's got some bounciness to it, you add some release. So and of course, you can add more effects to that. You can add things like bit crusher. Or just regular distortion. So even there, you're pretty much there to your bass and sound. What's going on? Appreciate you stopping by. Usual suspects starting to drop in. Appreciate that. Of course, you can add some modulation to that as well. Things like flanger. Let's get this popping. fatter bass synth sound here. If you wanted to, you know, things like chord, delay. So whatever you want to use there. Additional effects. So some other things you can do with the Chimera, you got some sampling abilities on there as well. You have the wave morphing wave table, wave shapes. Also, you have some unique wave shapes in here too, like the game. They got these game ones. Still monophonic, polyphonic if you wanted to. So, you know, it's a very powerful unit, you know, and it definitely has some unique features that and sounds that you can't necessarily get to with other units. You know, that's what drew me to the Chimera. See, we got these organ wave shapes. So just by experimenting with, you know, we got pretty much a lot of the sub bass coming from the second oscillator already. We're just changing this top one to different things. For instance, there's some samples and that's a morphing wavetable right there. So I actually like that. I'm gonna keep that right there. So while you may not necessarily think of the Chimera when it comes to synth bass, it definitely is very well capable of doing some really great synth bass sounds, you know? All right. So let's move on to see what we can do with this free app, right? So we'll get to the Enzo X after this one. make sure the iPad is on screen here. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see all that. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, Cash App, Super Chat, all that's open. I definitely appreciate it. Also, if you want like my presets for these various devices and ones you don't see, you can check all that out on the Patreon. You'll find all my preset packs there. All right, so that's the saw wave. We'll start there. Let's drop a sine wave in here. Let's bring that saw wave back some. So this is just the oscillators. All right. Good sound there. Right off the back. So let's turn on these filters. This is not like a long drawn out process a lot of times. With things like the Chimera, it has a lot of different sounds like wave shapes and, you know, different things, types of synths within it. So, you know, experimenting takes even more time, you know. It's not a bad thing. It just gives you more flexibility. But turn this So right there, I just took down the cutoff to give me a nice bottom to the filter cutoff, and gonna add some bit of resonance. And when I'm building bass sounds, I'm typically, maybe 10 to 20% on that resonance. You use too much resonance a lot of times, you start to lose some low end. So if you like nice big bass synth patches, that's one of the keys there. So even right there, we got nice synth bass sound there. We need to put this in monophonic mode as well. So we'll go, the thing about this Pure Synth app is you get 4 oscillators, right? And it's free. This is free for the iPad. I don't know if they have it on the Android devices and things like that, but the same app is available for iPhone as well. It's the Pure Synth Platinum 2 app. It's free. But it gives you 4 oscillators, 4 different ADSRs for the filters, which means each oscillator gets its own filter, ADSR, and amp envelope. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot, very flexible. You also have a LFO here. You got a full effects rack. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4 effects here. And you got a whole reverb, another 4 or 5 effects you can have, as well as a mastering rack as well. So you get like 15 up to 15 different effects right there in the effects loop, in the effects area of the app. And then you get a mixer, so you can easily mix and pan your different waveforms. And of course you can bring up the piano and play it on the actual device itself. If you need to go in these settings, they're all easy to get to, so we don't need to go through all of that. But let's turn this on monophonic for both. You have to do it for each individual oscillator. And that's pretty cool as well. It gives you a ton of flexibility to just change, everything, which is great. And you can have EQ on each track. On each oscillator as well. And you can have control the feedback and the tuning transpose of all that stuff there as well. So you get a ton of options on here. So let's finish building this sound. So let's go back to this first filters, oscillators. Let's add a bit of resonance. The cool thing about this, having so many, having four separate filter ADSRs for your synth sounds, now you can use more resonance on one of the oscillators than the other, and that way you can keep that low end, but still get that high end growl that you want from the resonant sounds. So all I did there, pretty much the second oscillator's filter is just open because it's just a sine wave, so it's already just a nice big wave. Doesn't really have too much higher harmonic content. But the saw wave one filter I have with it looks like about 50% on the resonance and just enough envelope amount to just open that filter up a bit. So you get that nice owl sound. If I wanted to add some glide, I could. Glide or portamento. It's at a really long time. You can have separate times too. Look at that. That's crazy from a free app on the iPad. It's free. And it's not like it's just free right now. This has always been free. So we don't necessarily need that. Let's add just a little bit of attack. So I added a little bit of attack to the first the saw wave ADSR amp envelope, you know what I'm saying? So I can literally have that bass sound first and then have that sound fade in immediately. You already, it didn't even take long to get to a nice bass sound from that. You know, it really isn't always about having the most expensive gear. Sometimes it's just knowing how to get to, certain type of sounds. That's why understanding the oscillators is so important. Once you get the oscillators sounding nice and big by themselves, then you throw in that filter and you can pretty much shape it to the nice bass sound that you want. But you got to get the oscillators levels correct first. Now here I can easily just save that. Let's say, I think I'm on. I think it's number 4. So I already created a few in But yeah, you can create some really nice bass sounds with this app. I didn't even do. Go back to that one I just made. I didn't add any extra stuff on here yet. So all this is just the synth portion of the app. I can still go back to the effects rack, and then you get all these different effects you can add. Let's say, let's see what we got in here. You got something like the sub. If you need it more bottom for whatever, which you really don't, they got this thing in here. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, come on. The sub something. Yep, sub harm. Just instantly makes it massive. Without it, we're just gonna add just a tiny bit of it. We can add some things like compressors, chorus, any, modulations, delays, reverb, drives. You got all of that in here. Let's see a little bit of. Yeah, I don't like how that takes out all my bottom. Of course, if you wanted to EQ it, you could. Let's add just a smidge of mid-range. We're just shaping the sound with effects now. Let's add a little compression on that. nice big synth, you know? And we ain't even add anything like chorus yet. You know, something like some chorus. Let's see what else we got on here. Phasers, flangers, Ottawa. Yeah, you got a lot of effects here. Let's see. You even get a nice growl when you get that sweep in there. So for me, the real key is to just find out what really works. So you see, you can just get funky with this random app. And it has a nice texture to it. Nice texture too. So, all right, let's move on to the Enzo X. Just the saw wave. We'll bring in the bottom square wave there. The cool thing about the Enzo X is it has these things called, I'm going to sit down for a second. It's got the oscillator whiffs, right? So I can have this saw wave sound like this, or have it go in all the way till it gets more square. So now it sounds like a square wave. And we'll compare that to an actual square wave real quick so you can hear that. Come on, work with me now. Then you also got the triangle wave here. Just turning this up just a bit. So you're already in that, getting in that sub bass territory, especially with that triangle wave. Like that has a nice bottom to it. So does the square wave. All right, so we can go with triangle on the bottom, with the square on top. Because the triangle seems to have the biggest bottom. Right, we'll pull that saw wave back. And that's just the oscillators. Like you gotta have that oscillator sounding real big. So I mean, that's right there, to be honest with you. That's a good starting place for a nice bass sound. I like to have a little ramp time, like a little 2-second ramp, mod ramp time on there. So now we can come over to the filter section. And again, for most classic bass synth sounds, you're just using like for the amp envelope ADSR, you're just using like all sustain. You don't really need any decay, attack, or release time, just straight up note. Now, if you want to be fancy, you can do things like have a decay time, bring the sustain level down. Time a little longer. And in this case, it will get to the sustain, and because I have the sustain time all the way up, it'll sustain infinitely. But it'll come down to about 38% of the original volume of the note. Hear that volume drop there. That's one volume, then it drops down. And I find that helps sometimes as well, so you're not just like one big massive note when you hold the notes. It actually like having that slight volume drop just gives a little bit space to the rest of the instruments and things going on. Y'all make sure y'all hit that like button for me on all the different platforms. Appreciate y'all chiming in, hanging out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and anything else I forgot. But I definitely appreciate all you guys. Where we at? All right, so let's go over to the filter section here. So we'll bring that filter cutoff down. I typically like mine to go down to around 420. Give it a little bit of resonance here. So like somewhere like 2.2 to 3. Let's give it a little bit of amp envelope here. Let's let that open up a little bit more. So let's give a little more decay on that. So you're already in that territory of having that nicer bass sound rocking for you. Let's see what else we got. So from here, you wanna, when you're working with these different pedals and stuff, you wanna save periodically. For the Enzo X, you can just press this button or hold the foot switch that's to the corresponding preset that you're on, and it'll save. So I like to add things like the op amp because it gives you a nice bottom to your sound. Bring that volume down. Bring that gain down. And you got to experiment where you got the location at. So this is post, all the filter and stuff, or pre the filter. Without it, with it. All right, so got a nice bass sound rolling there already. And we're using the monophonic synth on If you wanted to add like echo, something like that. You can even bring out some of those lows. So So you can keep it like that, or you can also attach this to different times here. Let's change. Let's put these around similar times. Change that feedback. How long is? If we wanted to, we can. I liked it better with the single. Let's turn this off. That's half speed. Oh, you get just amazing delay there. Got some phase Mind you, that's all self-contained in the Enzo X. Flanger. So, and of course, you can change that any part of that that you would like to different things. The key thing is to understand the oscillators and get those sounding how almost pretty much how you want the overall sound to feel and all of that. So understanding how those will end up being filtered, because this is subtractive synth, meaning we use filters to subtract out frequencies we don't want to, to be in the sound, or we can do that at various times with the ADSR. Just depends. All right, what else we got? We got the Roland GX, Roland Xenology GX. Now this app, I'm very impressed with this app. Like I said, it is free for the next year, but it simply sounds like amazing. All right, so that's just your saw wave there. And we'll add the way Roland has their synth set up. This is the same sound engine as a lot of the Roland keyboards, like the Phantom and all that stuff, as well as same one in the GM 800, their big guitar synth, with the thing. And one of the benefits of having something like a Future Impact and the Chimera they export the MIDI after they detect pitches. So when you play your bass into them, they'll be able to export that MIDI out to an external device and allow you to control those sounds from there. So all these synths and stuff bass synths I build in my iPad, I'll be able to control those with my bass, and play them with my bass, which is amazing. So, and all with no extra pickup. All right, so there you go, saw wave. Let's see what we got. Let's put that on a -12 low pass filter. But they do have a lot of filters in here. Typically, the Chimera has this white pedal, has a good amount of filters. The Enzo X has 3 filters, but they're so flexible you can pretty much make the majority of filter sounds with them. Same thing with the Future Impact. It only has pretty much a few filters in there, but you can make pretty much almost any filter sound you would need from the Future Impact as well. On here, you got a bunch of different types of filters as well, including some that are custom to Roland. Like I believe that's the Jupiter's filter and things like that. So let's see. Let's get these oscillators. So the way they break their synths down into 4 partials, and each partial will allow you to have different type of synths on them. So you can have PCM. PCM is sampling. So if you wanted to build like piano sounds and things like that, or use some of the oscillator samples that they have from the different rolling keyboards in here, you can do that there. VA, virtual analog, is pretty much that saw wave, square wave, triangle. And PCM sync will pretty much allow you to modulate one sample with another, similar to FM. Then you got the super saw and the noise. Noise helps you get nice little extra stuff in your sound as well. So let's start with VA on the second one, and let's just hear what these oscillators sound like. Saw, square. Very nice oscillators. They sound really good. Come on, I can't believe this is an app. Not only is it an app, it's an app where it has so many extensive controls in this Roland Zenology GX app. You have the ability to have the 4 partials, you know what I'm saying, which is like having 4 different types of waveforms. Then each one of those has its own pitch envelope and modulation, its own filter envelope and modulation, an additional amp envelope modulation, and the amp one controls the volume. So if you want to vary the volume of your sound, you got its own filter, its own EQ, the ability to pan these different oscillators or partials, you know, and then you also have 2 LFOs available to you, all for each partial. So it's not like you have to have the same one for each one. And then you can come over here if you wanted to see all the partials at once. You know, they have a very nice layout to this app. Very easy to understand if you know how to use a synth. But the key thing is to start, you know, find the initial tone, like in the browser app. That'll clear everything out if you just want to build. And then bam. So this is just the sine wave. Let's see those. Ramp. Juno. Wave. Another triangle wave. Triangle 3. And sine 2. Now you have the ability also to add pulse width modulation to these different oscillators. You have, you can change the width of them, and you can change how fat they are. So yeah, how big that. Now I just changed the width of it. Which sounds very similar to the triangle as it is. Let's see about. That's a triangle wave, which you can also make fatter. Ooh. Which makes it almost at that point identical. oscillator by itself. So let's actually start building now. All right, so we'll take that saw wave, and you even got stuff like the super saw wave in here as well. Let's take this to the sound So we're gonna put a sine wave an octave down, and we'll put add a little analog feel. Just a lot of analog feel. Just a little bit. Where the oscillators drift just slightly. So far, it's just the oscillators. We ain't even added all the extra yet. So let's go over here, put a couple filters on things. Now we gotta do a little bit of work to these. Let's go here. Let's bring this cutoff down on the first oscillator. You're also gonna roll off the bass on this first saw wave. just shaping the filter now. You can pan these oscillators different ways as well. Y'all feel free to ask questions. Appreciate you guys. We can add another partial here. Started to get to something a little different. Let's put some legato on that. Seems to have this overall like filter control up here. Let's go over to this mixer. Mixes, where is... Trying to make sure we got these wave gain. Let's realize. So even creating something like this, you know, it's not hard to do, especially when you have a screen the size of an iPad, you know. You can actually, and then they laid out the app, in my opinion, pretty much as well as I've seen any other app laid out. And it can be confusing if you don't know what a partial is. And, you know, the partial, don't get that confused. The partial just allows you to have each oscillator have all its own set of parameters and ADSRs. So I think that's going to be number 5 in here. Okay. Come on, as an app? This Roland Zenology GX, just grab it and try it out. It's free for a year. What do you got to lose? You know? Now you got some nice big bass effects, and you can also come over to the effects section. You can add things like chorus, additional filters, EQs, enhancer. Let's see what exciter or let's check out phaser. So basically, it's not difficult at all to get it to sound really good. Phaser, chorus. I'm very impressed with this app. I'm very impressed with it. And these are the same sounds that you can take these same sounds if you have a Phantom, or something else that has that rolling feature to it. You can import these same settings directly in onto different keyboards, or directly onto the plugin on the computer, things like that, and you'll have all your sounds, same sounds that you used on your records and all that other stuff immediately available to you. Nice big bass sounds in here. And I've been able to, create quite a few of them. And I mean, it's just so flexible. You really can't run out of ideas with this one app, which is you can replace an entire keyboard with this app and never blink an eye. You still got great piano sounds and all that stuff in there too. Great lo-fi sounds. Great EPs. So nice strings. Amazing pads in here too. So just a great app to just have, if you, especially if you are brand new to synth, this will give you a good visual layout. If you can figure out how to use this Roland Xenology GX app, you pretty much can use a lot of other synths. Most synths kind of work pretty similar, so once you get a hold on how synths work, that app is insane. And the flexibility for you to build sounds is I don't think there's a more flexible app that has better sounds and better samples. Nah. All right. So let's move on to the future impact. Let me see if I can pull this screen up for you guys. Let's see what I got here. Let me just add it onto here. So give me 1 second, guys. See what we got here. Window capture. Should see it right there. All right, so I'm pulling up this future impact. All right, so that's kind of. Hold on, guys. That's killing me right there for some reason. Um, Sorry, but give me 1 second. I got you. All right, what's holding me up? Oh, okay. Let me get this back on. All right, sorry about that, guys. Thanks for hanging in there for a second. Appreciate it. I'm not going to be able to pull up future impacts for some reason. Let me see if it just let me go to it without tripping out. Yeah, I really want to show you guys the screen. It's not trying to cooperate with me. Let me see if I could just pull up another instance real quick. Yeah, it did. Give me 1 second, guys. I want you guys to be able to see, of course. All right, let's just make this smaller. Just bring this up real quick. Let me know if y'all can see that. Well, I got to adjust it for both streams separately, fortunately. Always. play with me here. All right. We almost there, folks. Appreciate your patience. All right. Come on. All right, we should be back up and running now. Let me know. Let me know if y'all can see that well. Future impact. This is saw wave on the future impact. Nice big saw wave you can change. Got the saw wave there. Triangle wave. Make sure y'all can see well. All right, cool. Square wave. You can change the square wave, of course, and saw wave. Then I'll pause. Straight up square wave there. You got the triangle wave. All right, so one thing I was kind of experimenting with last night with this particular app, I wanted to do like all saw waves, like all 4 oscillators, to almost get like that super saw type thing you can get on the rolling app there. Saw wave. It's starting to get thick. Throw another saw wave on it. Creates a really thick saw wave. So now you got a nice thick super saw type, huge saw wave. You can play around with the case. So, all right, and all that's before we ever even hit the filter. So let's go ahead and hit the filter now. Now, a lot of people, a lot of bass synths were built with just cut off all the way off and using the ADSR to modulate it from there. Tactile on that. And you use this accent to get. So if you don't want so much chorusing between them, you can easily just reduce this here. Without putting on no chorus, it's just using this beat here to detune them. This is why I always say, you know, you want those oscillators to sound good before anything, because that's the sound, you know. So always get those oscillators to sound pretty nice even before you add on the filter and stuff. Had a little So we getting there. I like to add some modulation, LFO, some LFO to the VCO rather, around 4, 5, 6 hertz. So you got that there, and legato. The other cool feature of the Future Impact, you got this legato mode on the portamento, and what that allows you to do is when you're playing staccato, lets you still do it, but you still can play legato and have that time. So say I had an extreme time. I can still use that and play the sound. See, and then anytime you play legato, it'll do the portamento. But if I do, so basically, based on my articulation, I can make it trigger the portamento or not. And I like that a lot. So I'm gonna go ahead and say this where it is. And I think this is number 4. Call this number 4. And we'll come down to the overdrive section. I just like to turn this on. Just give me a little. Not too much. I'm not doing all of this. Just low tube saturation. Without it. With it. You barely can hear the difference, but it warms the sound up just a bit. Let me come over to the EQ. Give me a little shuffle. Give me a little dip around 500. Sorry about that. And maybe just a little bit of roll off on the top end. Actually, no. So even right here, right, you have more options within the Future Impact. If I wanted to have some of my dry signal from my bass be processed by the harmonizer section or the distortion section, I can do that here. And I can also have that run through the filter as well. If I wanted to add a bit of noise to the sound, I'll be exaggerated. So in this case, so if you wanted to add some of that type of sound without it, with it, so maybe just adds a little bit of something to it there. Go ahead and say that. Just a little bit of noise on that. Might even bring this down. Let's see where we at. Yeah, see that right there. And sometimes it's just little tweaks like that. You just, you know, some things you're gonna EQ in or out a little later. Like I added a little bit more bottom to it with the EQ section, and just a slight little dip in around 500, a slight boost around 2K shelf, you know. And what that just does, it just kind of nudges the parts I want to really cut through or support, like the bottom, but still have a good amount of. So you still got a good amount of that stuff there. Now, you can also easily just start shifting pitches. If I needed some more bottom, I can swap out one of these. Let me see, I'm gonna save that as a different one real quick. I'm gonna swap one of these out for a square wave. Yeah, I like the triangle wave in there as well. You know, and at this point, you can also, the other cool thing about the Future Impact is you don't have to just go with individual waveforms for each oscillator. You can actually mix them up. So say I wanted on this higher one, I wanted to get some square wave in there. Wanted to get some triangle up top. Let's make this pulse wave a little smaller up top. So if you want to smooth that out, you can use the filter to smooth that out a bit more. I'm going to show you that 1 second. I'm just saving these different variations of this. So when I want to work out with them later, I got them already. So something like this, I might bring that really high frequency down some. And at the same time, we can bring up smoothing this out, take some of that noise out. Noise out completely, actually. Yeah, there we go. See, you just gotta play around with the levels of them oscillators and understand how they interact and like listen. You know, that's why you hear me play a note and then actually move the slider till I hear it get into a bigger, bassier sound. You know, that's for a reason. It's really hard to do just by guessing because there's so many variations you have here in the oscillator section. But you gotta, sometimes it just take one note and then you tweaking things. If I wanted to thin that sound out and get some more. And if we change that filter to the 12, too much bottom on that. Let's bring that down. Roll off a little too hard. Let's go to the extreme frequencies. So essentially, you know, knowing what these oscillators sound like individually, as well as making sure that you know what the filter's doing, how to use it. You know, of course, if you add more attack to that type of sound, even changing slight things with the filter like that will result in completely different sounds. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back. Here's one. So that's one variation. Another variation. Another variation. And so all those are different variations of the same or similar sound, like different, slightly different oscillator combinations, slightly different filters. But you see, they all made a huge difference in the sound. So as you're understanding each individual piece of gear, it does take some time to, wrap your mind around these oscillators and the amp envelope for those, which just varies the volume, if you're going to fade in, if it's going to be a pluck sound, or if it's going to be a long, just sustained synth sound. And then you have the filter parameters that you will worry about next. And a lot of times we'll start with the cutoff of the filter. Then we'll move to the ADSR envelope, and how much of that envelope amount. So the filter envelope amount, how much the filter is actually going to be opening or closing and coming up to the filter cutoff. Then we have the resonance for a more exaggerated sweep or a more subtle sweep of those frequencies. And the ADSR of that filter section can make that filter open. Say it's an open and closing filter. It can make it open slowly or open very quickly. And decay would be after it opens. How fast does it come back down to the sustain level, the S in the ADSR? And then after you release the note, what is the filter doing? Does it just snap close, or does it stay open to, for whatever reason, so that's the release part of the ADSR. So then from there, you can throw on saturation things like overdrive, and put on things like EQ, modulations, delay, even reverb. And then you pretty much finish out your sound from there with some compression or limiting at the end of your chain. It may not be done exactly within the synth pedals or within the apps. I'm using the Mercury X to finish out my chains. So, and also the Tonex 1 Plus, which is running JHS Colorbox V2 tone models on there. So all these different things are working together. It's not just one thing. That's why it always sounds so like complete and full. You can just get some great sounds with these units. So let's just recap real quick, because I'm about to get out of here. I definitely appreciate you guys hanging with me. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Hit those reactions for me. Feel free to ask any questions real quick while I am getting this together. All right. And also feel free to hit that Cash App. So here's the Enzo X synth we built. And here's the one we built on the Cumera. Where we at? Turn it. And only thing I want to add to that real quick is a bit of glide. Just a smidge. So that's Cumera. Here's the synth we built with the free Pure Synth Platinum 2 app that is free for iPad and all that stuff. Not sure if it's available on other platforms, but this is also available on iPhone. So if you just want to play around with a synth on your phone, you know, you can get this app and it's a full-fledged synth. And it's free. And it's free 99. Come on now. Also, check out the Neo Soul Keys app. That's another good one. And then we got the Roland Zenology app here. Zenology GX. Let's see, where's my settings? So, as you can hear, every single one of those, I guess, ways of creating bass synth is valuable to you. You know, if you, for instance, you know, say you don't have the money to buy all these, you know, the Future Impact, the Cumera, the Enzo X, and all you got is your iPhone, you can still get your synth bass on. You feel me? You get you a nice little USB hub, a nice little MIDI controller, or find something like the iRig Keys IO used, and this can be your MIDI controller and your audio interface all in one. And bam, you got your Keybase rig in your phone. You know, if you get something like the Zenology GX app is only available on iPad. It's not available on iPhone, but the Pure Synth app is. So definitely check that out. And so, I mean, you can get just some nasty synths with all these things. Where we at? Bam. Even things like Sample Tank. You know, I've been able to get some really nasty bass sounds with Sample Tank as well. So, don't sleep on that either. So even with Sample Tank, you can get some great synth basses, but Sample Tank again is just samples. Unlike the Roland Zenology GX app is an entire synth. Like it literally does replace a keyboard and does it very well. Not just barely, it does it very well. And then but Sample Tank does have some stuff in there that has some very nice samples in it, and you can like do things like manipulate the filters and things like that. You just can't really change the oscillators, from what they are. But you do have a full ADSR for those oscillators and for the filter section as well. So Sample Tank will work as well, But I, out of so out of all of these, I actually love all of them as for different stuff. I can easily hear myself using each one of these different things: the Future Impact V4 VIP, the Chimera, the Enzo X, the Pure Synth Platinum app, and the Roland Zenology GX app. I can see myself using all five of those things to, create pretty much any bass synth sound I could think of or need to create. I really don't need any more bass synths. Like literally, I have like a few hundred bass synth sounds for this. I'm getting about 20, 30 on the Chimera. Got about another 30 on the Enzo X. And I'm not even done creating, and these are just the synth bass sounds, not including the pads and the keyboard sounds, the synth sounds, brass sounds, horn, woodwind sounds, all that stuff, and just general synth stuff that I can do with each and every one of these pedals and never duplicate the same sound, because on each device or each application, the things just sound different. Like even if you try to create the same exact sounds on each one, you're going to have a really hard time. Now, if you're looking for the one that's going to duplicate like Moog and ARP 2600 sounds, that's going to be the Future Impact. If you want just like a lo-fi synth machine, that Chimera is going to be amazing. If you want a hi-fi, like super high quality, the highest quality sound quality of effects, oscillators, and everything else, the Enzo X is going to do that for you. Amazing. Again, the Roland Zenology app just replaces your whole keyboard rig. So you don't need any, if you say you have these pedals, but you want to get to piano and EP and different sounds like that, that Roland Zenology GX app is perfect for that. as well as the Pure Synth app just adds you different layers. So like if I was to use all this stuff together, right, I wouldn't use them as bass synths. I would use them as individual sounds. Like so for, let's get some. So that's the Future Impact. I mean the Enzo X, right? That's one layer. Enzo X on the desk. Humera. Turn on the other Enzo X. So we might come over here, let's do EP. And I can still come in here, add sample tank to the mix, right? And add a couple pads and piano. Pure synth. Let me add a little bit more space here. Come over to the Future Impact. Add one of my presets for the Mercury X. I just froze the Mercury X. So just to peel back the layers for a sec. Sample tank. Sample tank got some good sounds in it, man. Don't sleep. So Chimera. Yeah. Definitely one of my favorite synth sounds. Chimera be kicking butt. Enzo X. Xenology with the EP. And I can actually turn on like the Neo Soul Keys app too instead. We can use the Xenology app for something else. Let's say some cinematic strings or something like that. Pure synth. Sample tank. And so So this is literally what's going on, folks. Appreciate you chiming in. Make sure y'all hit that like button and subscribe as well. So what you're hearing there is literally 2 Enzo X's. Well, no, I didn't add the last one. Let me add this last one. so that's how you know, if you have multiple synths and things like that, you kind of can combine them together in different ways. Just a lot of it the same way with the oscillators. You ought to have each layer sounding good, you know, and then, you know, you try to balance those layers by importance. Like the EP is the most important, pianos under that, and I try to keep everything else below that stuff and spread out a bit, you know. So you got four apps running on the iPad, but it's really 6 sounds coming from the iPad at once. The EP from the Neo Soul Keys app, the strings from the Roland Xenology app, GX. You got piano and 2 Nord samples coming from Sample Tank, and you have another pad coming from the Pure Synth Platinum 2 app. Then you got another pad on the Chimera, and you got 2 additional pads on the Enzo X pedals. And then we also had another sound on the Future Impact. So that's 8 synths. Do you know how much room that would have taken up back in the day? You know, in the 70s, that would have been an entire room full of synths right there, just trying to get anything to sound half, you know, as clean as that. And to be able to manipulate it at one time. You know, there's different. I mean, this technology has come such a long way compared to what you would have to do before to get. Like I can literally compact this whole keyboard rig, because the whole keyboard rig is really just the 2 Enzo X pedals, Future Impact, Chimera, the Electro Harmonics tri-parallel mixer, the Tonix 1, and the Mercury X, and this iPad. That's the whole keyboard rig, like, and all that could fit on a medium-sized keyboard. I mean, a medium-sized pedal board, which is about half the size of this. I can fit just the synth stuff and have a medium-sized pedal board with, like, you talking about, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 synths on it. That's crazy. What's going on, folks? Appreciate you. Yeah, I love the Future Impact. It definitely has some great capabilities to it. So, you know. But let me get that out the way. But yeah, so I definitely love what you can do. So yeah, when you just start combining them and just adjusting those layers to fit, the mood, or just so everything's not so crowded. If I had everything at the same exact volume, I couldn't fit in all those layers. But it's literally, you know, it's literally about 10 layers. You know what I'm saying? And a ton of oscillators running there. Future Impact's running 3 to 4 oscillators. Chimera's running 2. Enzo, both of those are running 2 oscillators each, and 2 oscillators for each voice. So it's really running 12 oscillators each. Sample Tank, Xenology GX, Pure Neo Soul Keys app, and Pure Synth Platinum 2. That's a killer rig there. Yeah, I've tried those Roland pickups out. Those do respond very well. The Roland Xenology GX app is actually the same exact synth engine. So basically, the same synth engine from that. Well, not the GR500. I believe it's the same one as the GM800, and like the Phantom, which is the same synth engine as the Phantom, and I believe I want to say Jupiter. It's either the Juno or Jupiter, one of those, but it's the same sound engine or synth engine as those. So, yeah, I thought about getting one of those Roland MIDI pickups, but the only thing about it is I don't like about it is I have to get the unit in order to run MIDI out to other stuff, and that's not something I really like too much. Just it's an extra hassle for me, and actually what I'm going to do, because the future impact tracking has gotten so good, and also the Chimera and the Enzo X have great tracking as well, but the Chimera and the future impact allow you to play other synths with that same tracking. So if I wanted to play my bass and have it, track well and go out to these same sounds that I would be able to get with one of the Roland G800 GM800 pedals, which is like $1,000, $1,000 by itself. I have the same exact synth engine in here to use those same sounds live with my bass or with MIDI controllers and different things like that. But it's a way I kind of found around having to have that extra pickup installed and just dealing with that whole thing. The pedals now, they getting to the point now where you ain't gonna need no pickup or none of that. Like, in the next 2 to 3 years, that you won't need any external pickups for the tracking to be spot on. Like, look at what they've been able to do so far. Like, even Electro Harmonics with their POG 3 and V250 6 vocoder, those track exceptionally well. Like, they're flawless in their tracking, and the future impact has gotten with that upgrade that they did of the firmware. The tracking is just like it is super accurate and super fast. So Chimera, I'm still nailing down those tracking parameters, but it does track well when you're playing polyphonically. I'm still working on getting it better with the monophonic single lines, but Enzo X does great with both, but it does not allow you to play other synths from the MIDI out. You know what I'm saying? That's a feature that's only on the Future Impact and the Chimera. So, but yeah, I'm digging what Roland's doing these days, you know what I'm saying, in terms of like the sounds and what you can do in an iPad. And this same app is available on your computer. So if you don't have an iPad and you want it for your, you want to use these sounds on a Windows computer or a MacBook Pro, you can do that as well. And I thought that was really cool. You can, even if you don't have an iPad, you just take your laptop and you still got access to all these Roland sounds, you know what I'm saying? So that's really cool. But all right, guys, that's all I'm gonna do for today. I did on 2 hours and 40 minutes and almost 3 hours in here. I definitely appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I know this is a longer, live stream today, but make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the hype button, send the Cash App super chat if you find any of this information useful. See what we got here. Yeah. And those rolling units, they're not bad units at all. I think they got some great sounds, you know what I'm saying? I'm eventually going some point, if Roland ever wants me to check out that GM800 for them, I would. I definitely would do like a whole series on that, for you guys, because that is an extensive pedal, so, but thank you as usual for showing up, Laptop Les. I definitely appreciate you. You always come through, and the usual suspects. I appreciate all you guys and the people over on Patreon and the channel members. Thank you to all you guys that support the channel financially, throwing in, and buy preset packs and all that good stuff. Thanks to all of you guys, helping me keep this channel going. So thank you, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Make sure that you are have a good day on purpose. Remember, don't let a moment ruin your whole day. A moment is just that moment. Let it go. Let your day go on. Have a positive day. Don't let nobody possibly even stop you from having a good day. If you're alive, it's a good day. All right. Y'all take it easy. This has been another episode of All Bass Creations, Effects, Tutorials, Demos, and Review. I am the Bass Nagus. Find me on all social media at the Bass Nagus. And I will catch you guys next time. Peace.